everybody. Happy Friday, May 26th, 2017. My name is John Lorden, and we are here with another episode of BrainScratch. Also want to give you a quick reminder, there is a Johnny Vlogs Live happening this afternoon at 2 p.m. Central Time. You really want to check it out if you can. It's about trafficking and a great organization called Destiny Rescue. And you can find out all about how they're trying to combat trafficking and how you can help them do that. So please be sure to join us. There's also going to be an open Q&A session. I think it's going to be a really informative hour, and it might even run a little longer than an hour, but we'll see. Today's BrainScratch, we're going to change pace a little bit. You know, about once a month or so, I feel like things start to get a little heavy on the channel. We've had a lot of very serious cases lately, and I like to throw in a fringe case, and that is what we're doing today. Today we're looking into the San Pedro haunting, and before we get started, I have to give a very big thank you to my associate producer, Christy Straciner, who also likes to do some research on the side, and she did the research for this case. Thank you so much for your help on it, Christy. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started looking in the San Pedro haunting. Jackie Hernandez moved into a rental home at 593 West 11th Street in San Pedro, California in November of 1988. She had recently separated from her husband and was working several different jobs to make ends meet. During this time, she was also studying to become a child psychologist while raising 2 children. After only a month of living in the bungalow, she started to hear strange noises, see strange balls of light, and witnessed objects being thrown around her home. This all came to a crescendo when, in the summer of 1989, Jackie showed up frantically at her neighbor's door, Susan Castaneda. She explained to Susan that she had been up watching the honeymooners while both of her children slept. Suddenly, a violent colored mist floated in through her open window and into the room, where it hovered for a few seconds before dissipating. Thinking this odd, she decided to check on the children. Both Jamie, 3 years old, and Samantha, only 4 months old, shared the same room, with Jamie sleeping on the top bunk of a bunk bed set and Samantha in her crib. On the bottom bunk sat an old man. His legs were crossed, and he was glaring at her maliciously. Although the encounter was quick, she was able to give a description of the man: very thin, with gray skin, wearing a red flannel shirt and high-water pants, quote, like the old gas station attendant's pants. After taking time to think about it, Jackie decided to take her neighbor Susan's advice and call Dr. Barry Taff, a known parapsychologist who had just been featured on a television show about the ghosts of the Queen Mary, as well as being notable for having investigated the entity haunting involving Doris Bither. I have to say, the entity haunting was something that caught my attention when I was really young. I had seen that movie, which might have not been entirely appropriate if you know what happens in that film. I have to highly recommend it. I think it's a really good movie, particularly about a poltergeist activity. And it certainly piqued my interest in that topic, and I'm pretty sure it's part of the reason why I'm even doing these types of episodes on BrainScratch. I've constantly wondered about what parts of that story are true versus what parts are fiction that were done for the production of a film. And I kind of feel the same way about this case. So let's continue here. What follows are the documented events that took place from 1989 to roughly 1993. And here we get the people of interest. Jackie Hernandez, she is the mother of 2 experiencing this stuff. Jeff Wheatcraft, he is part of the paranormal investigation team that comes in, though I tried to look into his background a little bit to see what his expertise is. And I'm not really sure he had a very good background for this type of work. He was a school teacher at some point, gave up on that, decided to try to become a photographer, and he moved to New York. I think that's how he got kind of lumped into this, but I'm still not sure. Dr. Barry Taff, who for a period of time, I guess, was working with UCLA. He has been in this field for numerous decades at this point. He says he's investigated over 4,000 cases. And Barry Conrad, yes, I have to keep track of two Barrys. Barry Conrad is a cinematographer. He actually has an IMDB profile that we can take a look at here. Let's see. He's got 9 cinematographer credits, 5 producer credits, 3 director credits. Looks like he was active primarily from 1990 to about 2012. I don't know if he still has projects he's working on or not, but it doesn't look like he's had much going on recently. He also looks quite a bit different. I've been watching a lot of footage on this case, and a lot of it, there's a good chunk of things that happen in his apartment. And he's definitely, this must be a more recent picture because he looks a bit different here. Jackie Hernandez is in this picture here on the left, along with her neighbors Chrissy Zivkovic and Susan Castaneda. There is a documentary on this case. The documentary was actually directed by Barry Conrad, which I think is a little weird because he winds up being kind of the focal point towards the end of the documentary. I don't know that that's the best thing if you're trying to be objective in cases like this, if you actually direct yourself in that manner. And it kind of makes me wonder about the material that's presented. Did he create or fabricate some things because he was intending on making a movie about all this at some point? It really raises a lot of questions. But the first half of the documentary, I actually really enjoyed, except for they use this stupid monster makeup effect in a couple of scenes, and the reality of the events just don't need it. But outside of that, it goes into Jackie's story, gives you a lot of footage of their paranormal investigation around it. I thought the first half was really good. Unfortunately, the second half just completely drives off a cliff in terms of believability. Once you have Barry and Jeff, I don't know if they're living together or just hanging out together a lot, but there's a bunch of footage towards the end of this documentary where there's really ridiculously odd things happening, and these guys are just getting scared over and over and filming all this stuff in this tiny apartment. Like, oh my God, someone turned a jar of mayonnaise upside down in the fridge. Who could have done that? Someone's leaving the burners on the stove on. It really reaches into some ridiculous places for me personally, especially when compared to the events that they cover earlier in the documentary about Jackie. But that's just my personal feeling about it. After moving into the house in November of 1988, Jackie never felt like she was alone. She would constantly feel a presence behind her, but when she turned, no one was there. Soon after, objects started to move on their own. While visiting with her friend Darlene, they heard a huge crash coming from the kitchen. When the women went to investigate, they found one of Jackie's pictures, a painting of a goose, lying on her kitchen counter 5 feet from where it originally hung. A small table that sat under the painting had the 2 nails that held the painting on the wall sitting on it vertically. Now, if it was just that instance in itself, you might say it's a picture on the wall. Maybe it was too heavy for the nails they put in. It fell out. Maybe the plaster was cheap or was going bad and the nails slid out. It was a large picture, so for it to fall over and wind up 5 feet away, depending on how it tips over, I don't think that is out of the realm of possibility. And the nails also came out. So if that was the only case here or the only instance here, I would say case closed. A picture fell off the wall. Let's not consider it further. But there's a lot more information going on here. One night, a stream of water poured out of a light switch near the entryway. This lasted about 5 seconds and never happened again. There were no leaks or water damage of any kind found, and the light switch continued to function normally. Now, once again, in terms of things that could happen just to regular people, I had an occurrence where I bought a house, and the first time it rained, water started pouring in through a ceiling fan. It was actually coming in through the hole that the ceiling fan was mounted in, dripped over, and was landing in my office. When it comes to water leaks, electrical conduits are a great thing for water leaks to ride on. and they can come in through the holes that are made for those electrical items very easily, as opposed to just sitting up in a roof, trying to get through drywall or something like that. So once again, we're looking at a couple of different events here. Could it just be a house that isn't very well maintained? Possibly. A friendly calico cat that had been purchased for her son started growling and hissing. She later noticed that the cat would chase shadows that flitted across her walls. She could find no source for the shadows. In terms of cats chasing light sources, I have to say I have a cat that literally bugs me every night. If I don't play with her with the laser pointer, she is upset. So I get cats responding to light sources. Not being able to trace the source of the shadows is a bit interesting, and Jackie definitely has a lot of occurrences that have to do with lights that she doesn't understand where they're coming from very well. We'll get more into that as we keep going. Susan Castaneda, upon visiting one night, witnessed a lamp lift off the table it was sitting on and land 7 feet away. Now, occurrences like that I find extremely compelling because you have multiple witnesses, you have someone that is not a focal point of this investigation, someone that's obviously not looking for any kind of attention. She's just a neighbor. She sees this happen and she notes that it happens. I find that one really interesting. One night, Jackie woke around midnight to use the bathroom. From her daybed, she could see directly into the kitchen. At the kitchen table sat an old man glaring at her. She was too scared to get out of bed and covered her head up and hoped it would go away. Unfortunately, the apparition sat there until dawn when it slowly faded away. Jackie would later witness the apparition in different parts of her house. That's a pretty major claim there. And she does seem to note, I've seen her interviewed in several places, she does seem to note that these occurrences happen at night and she feels much safer during the day because these things don't seem to happen. A neighbor had found some money in her attic one day while cleaning, and Jackie heard about it. Since Jackie hadn't really explored her attic, she decided to go up there and see if she could find anything. The room was dark, even during the day. Before she could look around, a disembodied head floated toward her out of the darkness. It scared her so bad that she fell out of the opening of the attic onto her washing machine. Just boiling this down to things that we can understand and explain. The attic, I've seen footage of the inside of the attic. There are no windows, so it is certainly going to be dark in there at any point, day or night. But outside of that, seeing a disembodied head floating towards you, once again, we have her claiming that there are apparitions that she is seeing regularly. It'd be great if we could get some footage or some investigators in there to look into that further. Maybe we will. A little foreshadowing there. One day, while washing dishes with a friend, they noticed an orange substance dripping down the sides of some of the glasses and cabinet doors. Jackie used a Q-tip to take some samples of the substance, which she placed into a plastic bag and gave to the investigators. We're going to learn a lot more about that substance as well. Timeline of events during the investigation. August 8th, 1989. After conducting an interview, Barry, I believe we're talking about the Dr. Barry at that point, Dr. Barry Taff. Barry and his companions asked for a tour of the house. This didn't take long as the house is very small. At no time did anyone feel anything was amiss until they entered the laundry room. A couple of minutes after entering the laundry room, the group were hit with the overwhelming stench of iodine. After a few minutes, the smell disappeared. If there had been an open container, the smell would have been immediate and persistent. In the ceiling of the laundry room is the hatch to the attic. You have to climb on top of the washing machine to access the hatch. Jeff Wheatcraft volunteered as the skeptic of the group to go up and take photos of the attic. Now, I just want to stop here for a second. I've seen a lot of interviews conducted by Jeff. I've tried to look into him a bit more. I can't find a ton of information about him. I did see a clip from his sister talking about how skeptical he is, but I have to say, of all the footage I've seen of this guy, not only running around this house, but running around Barry Conrad's apartment and getting freaked out because there's scissors on the ground, I do not think Jeff Wheatcraft is skeptical in the least bit. He might have been the most skeptical of the group, but I don't think that is really saying much. Now, admittedly, he goes through some things here that might explain why he's not as skeptical as he used to be. Let's continue and see what we can find out about that. He goes into the attic. After several photos were taken, Wheatcraft came out of the attic somewhat pale and subdued. He explained that the whole time he was up there, he felt that someone was watching him. He explained that it was dark, but even with camera flashes, he saw no one. It was then suggested that Wheatcraft go back up and take pictures over his shoulder. That would conceivably catch someone behind him. After several minutes of taking pictures back and front, everyone downstairs heard a scream and a loud thud. Wheatcraft shot out of the attic, exclaiming that as he tried to take a picture over his right shoulder, the camera was tore from his hands and thrown into the darkness. The group quickly hooked up a high-powered light to illuminate the attic to make sure no one was hiding in the dark. After searching, Wheatcraft's camera was found without its lens, lying at the opposite end of the attic inside an old fruit crate. The lens was lying 15 feet away, port side up, on the other side of the attic crawlspace door. Before the investigation started, the attic was thoroughly searched. All that was found was a fruit crate, seashells, and a horseshoe. Now, I have a big question there. He goes up with the camera. He's taking pictures. Just to consider, could he possibly fake something that's going on up there? How hard would it be for him to throw the camera himself? The fact that the lens lies, 15 feet away from where the camera is that impossible to happen? Not necessarily. In this attic space, there are a lot of cross beams. We're going to see some pictures, some very interesting pictures that feature some of those cross beams soon. It's conceivable to me that if someone was going to fake something like this, they could throw the camera. If it hit one of those cross beams, the lens could certainly go one way and the camera could go another. So I don't know that information on its own is enough to be convinced that a ghost ripped the camera from his hand, broke the camera into two pieces, and threw those pieces in separate directions. Balls of light started to appear in the attic. They would dance around before vanishing. Not only was no one found hiding in the attic, but there was also no place for anyone to hide. Also, any movement caused the ceiling boards to creak and groan, which would give away someone's position immediately. As a matter of fact, there is some footage in the documentary, if you watch that, where everyone is downstairs and they hear people, or it sounds like they hear someone walking around in the attic. There's just a lot of creaking and groaning from the boards. When the attic door was pulled shut, the wood was pulled from Jackie's hand before it could be closed completely. Once again, in the documentary, there is footage of this. You can see that Jackie is indeed pretty freaked out. She's trying to pull the hatch closed, and she's saying that someone's pulling it away from her. Jackie's estranged husband, Al, was there the night of the first investigation. Not really believing in what was going on, he opted to stay with the children. While everyone was investigating, he said a voice had spoken very clearly in his ear, saying, "Tell them to get the F out of here." Soon after, everyone decided to retire for the night, with Chrissy agreeing to stay with Jackie. And everything just basically keeps continuing and somewhat escalating. August 26th, 1989, the mysterious slime presented itself again, this time for the cameras and other witnesses. No cracks could be found that the liquid emanated from. It just seemed to drip out of the wood itself from inside a cabinet that held decorative dolls. Samples were taken of this too. And here we actually get to see some photos of the ooze. You can see it's kind of a yellowy color. And this picture I find a little interesting because it doesn't look like it's near a crack necessarily. It looks like this corner has been painted over, but it does seem to be beading in the corner in particular. I'm not sure if there's something in that joint that the liquid is seeping through or something along those lines, but I find the pattern kind of interesting. In Barry's words, I believe we're talking about I should just call him Dr. Barry, quote, "It would have cost an arm and a leg to get the results tested at a lab, but knowing a friend who works in the lab helps. This person tested the ooze for the team and returned the following results. The ooze was actually human blood plasma with a high iodine and copper content. This sample also matched the sample Jackie had taken and handed over to the team on the first day of the investigation." Now, we get a very important note here. The technician that did the sample testing refused to be interviewed for the documentary or book that was done on this case. Not only did this gentleman do work for free, but it was done for pseudoscience, and he had no desire to have his name attached to a haunting. Not to mention the fact that he could have lost his job for doing the free work for a friend. What I find interesting about that is, why would Dr. Barry Taff risk this investigation in that manner? Why not pony up whatever money it costs to make sure that those liquids are tested accurately, especially if you're literally witnessing them oozing from the walls? Because he didn't do that, we now have something that skeptics are going to point at and say, well, isn't that convenient? And I kind of have to agree with them. We have supposed expert testimony with an anonymous expert, which makes that testimony extremely difficult to take at face value, if not impossible, if you're really trying to be critical about this. So that is a really bad oversight. And what's interesting to me is at this point, Dr. Taff has investigated, I think, over 2,000 separate cases before he came to this one. So why would you make a mistake like that and not be sure to dot that I or cross that T? I'm really not sure. August 28th, 1989, Jackie calls Barry to report balls of light flying across her kitchen ceiling, which was also witnessed by Chrissy. Once again, in the documentary, Chrissy is interviewed and says she was pretty freaked out by seeing these balls of light, and she was watching them race across the ceiling. Here we have a photo of the ball of light. To be perfectly honest with you guys, that type of photo evidence is not very compelling for me. To me, it looks like a reflection from the sun. It looks like some sunlight is reflecting. I mean, that could be the face of someone's wristwatch. Could be off some piece of glass somewhere. The wristwatch thing I find interesting because when I was a kid, I would do that all the time. I would love to get the sun's reflection off my wristwatch, because if you moved your wrist really quick, you can make it fly across walls in your ceilings very fast. It's unfortunate to me that Jackie spends so much of her time and focus on these balls of light, because I don't find this information very compelling. Now, in the documentary I keep referring to, they have supposed photographic experts talking about these balls of light and saying that they can't be reflections. I'm sorry, I don't buy that opinion, not for a second. And there's some other pictures where I'll talk to you a bit more about why. The photos were processed at a photo lab. The people working there were also skeptical and could not explain the balls of light. I think they're actually interviewed in the documentary as well. And it sounds like once they heard the story that Jackie was spewing, they found it all very interesting. But I don't know if they didn't know that story, would they look at those photos and say that they were interesting on their own? I kind of don't think so. I think they would just say, oh, look, that's a reflection that someone's taken a picture of. And why are they taking pictures of all these reflections? Here we get a picture. This is actually of the attic. And they're saying that in the lower left-hand corner that this is one of the balls of light that could be caught. And obviously, we have a much bigger ball of light up here on the right-hand corner. That's some kind of light kit that was stood up in the attic so that they could get some light up there. Now, the problem I have is looking at the position of where these lights are occurring and realizing that lenses are round. It is very easy to get a lens flare to happen at the exact opposite end of where you have a major light source. And not only do we have that, it looks to me like there's a couple of other points where the light is flaring across the round lens as well. So when I look at a picture like this, I find it very tough to buy into. Because I've gone and shot things and had the shots ruined by this same exact type of lens flare, I'm very familiar with it. So I don't see a picture like this and think there's something supernatural. But things do get even more drastic here. September 4th, 1989. Jackie calls the team again, saying her children's toys are levitating. The phone call is disconnected in the middle of it. Jeff insists it just cut the line. Jeff Wheatcraft and photographer Gary Boehm, a friend of Barry Conrad's, went into the attic for more photos. While they were up there, people in the house below claimed to hear 3 finger snaps, and they say they were as clear as day, like they happened right in the middle of the room. They yelled to the people in the attic, "It's down here," and told the 2 in the attic to come down. Gary started to head down with Jeff behind him. Upon hearing a gasp, Gary turned and used the flash from his camera to illuminate the darkness. Hanging from the ceiling, supported by a crossbeam, was Jeff. A piece of cord had been knotted and wrapped around his neck, hanging him from a nail. And here we see photographs of him actually hanging. Supposedly, Gary says he had to take these photos to see Jeff, to see where he was going, to try to help him. I look at these photos and I have a lot of questions, and there's also footage of them coming down from the attic that we're going to review towards the end of this. So I'm gonna leave those questions for now. That's a picture of Jeff once he actually gets out of the attic with the piece of cord around his neck. But what was this cord? Well, oddly, it was a clothesline cord, and the knot that was used to tie it around Wheatcraft's neck is a type of knot used almost exclusively by seafarers. It was a type of specialty knot. After getting everyone out of the attic, Barry Conrad, who had been filming everything, states he saw a ball of light in his viewfinder, the viewfinder of his video camera, that wasn't in front of the actual camera. He then felt a jolt like an electrical shock and began passing out. Jackie tried to get her kids out of harm's way by moving them to the porch. Within a few minutes, her 4-month-old daughter had a red mark on her forehead, and there is footage to confirm that the red mark was not there moments before. Really, if you guys are going to look into this case more, you have to watch that documentary. Like I said, the first half is definitely worth it, and you could probably tune it out once that first half is over. But you will actually see footage there of this occurrence with the mark on her daughter's head, and they show footage of Jackie doing something I find a little bit interesting. She goes to her daughter, she sees that there's a mark on her head, and her intuition right away is to start rubbing at the mark with her thumb. And it just struck me, the mark looked like, like if a kid bumps their head on something, it kind of turns red. Why a mother's instinct would be to start rubbing at it and kind of in a forceful way, I don't know. It made me a little suspicious of the mark. What made me much more suspicious of the mark is that Jackie actually rubs it completely off. So it is clearly not a mark from her child being hit. It looks like it could be makeup or something of some type. She literally rubs it off within a matter of seconds. And they even try to address that in the documentary, saying, oh, well, we didn't get a sample of it because she rubbed it off. I don't know. Could it have been more of the ooze possibly or something like that? Maybe, but I'm really not certain. Over the next several weeks, the activity escalated. It had been noticed that near the attic door, the word "go" had been scratched or written on the wood. Weeks later, Jackie's refrigerator door would fly open as she walked by. The alphabet magnets would fall to the floor, spelling only one word, "go." There must have been a lot of G's and O's in those alphabet magnets. During this time, it almost seems as if Barry Conrad uses Jackie's house as a come and see my haunting place. He brings a lot of associates and friends over with Jackie's permission. It was found that the previous owners had not only moved quite suddenly, but had also constructed a rather large replica of a Catholic altar in their front room. I'm not sure what the problem would be with having a Catholic altar. If it was, something else, if it was satanic or something along those lines, then I understand. And I'm also not sure where that information is coming from. There are so many different sources and so many different versions of this story being told. At one point while doing dishes, Jackie said she felt as though hands were placed on the sides of her head and pressure was exerted. Soon after, she lost hearing in her left ear, which slowly returned. It had been noted in still photos and on film that balls of light, referred to as rods, seemed to fly around people in frame as well as objects, sometimes flying into the person themselves. I've seen a lot of information about rods. Here we actually have a picture of a rod supposedly flying into Jackie. And Christy was able to find a Wikipedia article that has a really good photo that I don't know if we could say it definitively debunks rods, but this is a long exposure photograph of moths around a floodlight. And you can see that the shape that we're seeing here looks very, very similar to the shape we're seeing here as well. And in this particular footage, they also play this in the documentary. They're talking about how weird it is that the rod is emanating light, and it seems to be in a different light source from Jackie. Well, if you look to her left, you'll see that she's sitting right by it's either a window or a doorway. So I believe that there is a shaft of light that is basically coming towards the camera that isn't hitting her face. And when this insect is flying through it, it looks like it's lit up. There's a lot of instances in the documentary where they show what I consider bugs doing the same thing. You'll see that they're dark and shaded areas. They move into a lit area, and all of a sudden people are saying that they are glowing, which I don't know if that's really necessarily glowing. Here are some more pictures, orbs near the floor, and light reflects both on the wall and the floor, but there's no apparent light source. With these two pictures in particular, it's very difficult to tell if there is a light source there or not. The expert in the documentary is talking about how it looks like the light source is actually off the wall, but then if it was off the wall, that means that it should be kicking light back onto the wall, and we're not seeing that. That leads me to believe that these are just lights that are, I think it's a sun reflection, personally, that is just hitting the wall. And the issue about it highlighting the carpet in front of it, I don't understand why anyone thinks that that's suspicious at all. If I had a window with the sun facing through it, like I do right here, and I had a curtain I put in front of that window and I cut some holes in it, I could very easily recreate this. What I wish Jackie would have done, if we really want to see that these are light that's actually emanating from the wall, is, for example, in this photo here, if she would have put a book or some type of obstruction on this side so that we could see it, that there was no possible way for it to be a reflection, for it to be sunlight that was being reflected in. That would be very interesting to me. But unfortunately, none of these photos come anywhere near to doing that. And the fact that the carpet lights up, once the light reflection hits a white surface, it becomes its own light source at that point. It does bounce back away from that, particularly if the wall is white. Then it has a very clear and clean light that bounces back off of that. So it does make sense to me that the carpet could indeed light up in front of it. October 1989. After several months, all the activity finally drove Jackie from the bungalow. From there, she moved to a small trailer in Weldon, California. Unfortunately, in the beginning of 1990, activity started there as well. It started with scratching sounds in the storage shed. The balls of light started showing up again, and her daughter's bedspread caught on fire after Jackie and her friend saw a dark shape in the hallway. At one point, while moving a large screen TV to her outdoor shed, the face of the old man from her San Pedro house briefly appeared on the screen. Her neighbors that were helping her move the TV witnessed it as well. This was enough to warrant another call to Barry and Jeff on April 13th, 1990. They arrived close to midnight. Jeff witnessed a black mass in the storage shed. Some of Jackie's neighbors report seeing purple mist. Things died down, and at Jackie's insistence, her neighbor Tina, whom was spending the night, pulled out a Ouija board. Jackie, Tina, Jeff, and Barry sat down around it for a few hours. Apparently, the table started shaking, and it was moving so fast they had to write down the responses. Questions such as, "Are you a ghost?" were asked. "Yes," came the reply. "How many ghosts reside among the living?" she asked. "Phantoms fill the skies around you," it replied. From this session came most of the history attached to the spirit that had been tormenting Jackie and her family. The board told them that the spirit had been murdered in 1930 by someone who held him underwater. When asked why the spirit liked to torment Jeff Wheatcraft, he was told that he bore the likeness of his killer. Hoping to verify some of the information the session had garnered, Barry Conrad dug through San Pedro's newspaper archives. In 1930, he found an article about a Mr. Herman Hendrickson who had been murdered by drowning in the bay. This man had also lived in Jackie's house at that time, and he was a seaman. Does this explain, potentially, that the knot that was used around Jeff's neck was that type of nautical knot? Perhaps. I might have another explanation for that, but we'll get to that. The Ouija board sessions were interrupted by yet another attack on Jeff. He was thrown away from the table, crashing into the wall behind him. Tina ran out. Jackie went to get her kids out of the house. By June of 1990, Jackie moved back to San Pedro, now living in an apartment. She arranged to have a priest come in and bless it. After rather disdainfully looking around the house, the priest made the comment that some of the items in her house were inviting the evil spirits in, and this was all her fault. After observing her toddler crying, the priest declared that he was possessed. Even though Jamie cried and squirmed, the priest finished a blessing on him. After this, he left. The next day, social services made a cursory visit to take a look at Jackie and the conditions she and her children were living in. The priest from the day before had called and reported that Jackie was taking hallucinogens. Because this was just a cursory visit, nothing ever came of it. Barry, and we're talking about Barry Conrad, Barry insists that the attacks basically followed him home. He would find the burners on his stove turned on, and on July 5th, 1990, found 2 scissors underneath the pillows on his bed. Occurrences continued. A window was broken at one point, and a shard of glass from the window appeared on his typewriter in the kitchen. Jeff was, I don't know if he was living or visiting Barry, but they seemed to be hanging out a lot at this time. Jeff, while he was at Barry's house, was pushed in the back, leaving a red mark on his back, and bullets were left on the stove burner, but thankfully the ghost didn't turn the actual fire on that time. All right, there's a lot of information. That's a pretty good overview of it, but the more you look into this case, the more and more of these stories there are, so don't be surprised if you bump into things that I didn't cover here. But let's talk about some theories to refute the haunting here, some things that don't quite support it. Although a lot of these phenomena were centered in the attic initially, Jackie only looked up there to see if she could find something of value to sell. After that, the attic activity gets much worse, and the spirit seems to take up residence there. This just raises a question with me. I don't know why when I'm watching my favorite ghost hunting shows, why would spirits necessarily only stay in an attic? I mean, even the people in Beetlejuice lived in the attic, right? Why are spirits going to reserve themselves to areas that aren't occupied by people, particularly if they are truly haunting or trying to interact with those people to scare them or choke them or hurt them or do all this? Are they really going to only stay in the attic? Just for me personally, I don't quite understand that dynamic. But in this case, her occurrences happened around the house first. It's really Jeff's occurrence in the attic that all of a sudden kind of brings the drama and the focus up to the attic. When Jackie's telling this story, it's much more about her house. And quite honestly, I have some questions about Jeff and his information, and I'm really not certain if I should be buying it, but let's continue here. Supposedly, Barry Conrad was harassed by the entity in his home for quite a while. Again, there are no controls put into place to prove this activity. You have Barry running around with a camera. You have his buddy Jeff holding a microphone, trying to be like this announcer, almost in a ghost hunter type fashion. They're noticing extremely mundane stuff in some cases, like, oh my God, someone knocked the whiteout off the typewriter. And by the way, the place they're living in is a mess. Like, it's amazing that there isn't stuff falling all the time all around there. I really was not moved by the information about the haunting at Barry Conrad's apartment or the fact that this was following Jeff. I think that Jackie's information is way more compelling and harder to disprove than the information that we're getting about what happens to Jeff. But that's just my opinion personally. I also don't know if Jeff was actually living with Barry. From the documentary, I get the feeling that they're living together. So there is some potential that Jeff is pulling all this and Barry doesn't quite know about it. It's possible. I also have to ask, are they being motivated by Dr. Taff's previous success in terms of him investigating the entity case and seeing what happened with that, with, book deals and a major Hollywood movie going on? Is there something nudging these guys, knowing that Dr. Taff was a part of that and now they're working with him? Is it nudging them towards creating some of these events so that they could see that same type of success? I think we have to consider that. Could it even be subconscious, possibly? I don't know. The simplest theory is that Jackie was making all of this up. She didn't receive money for her involvement, but she got a lot of attention. She's definitely been interviewed in many, many places, and I don't know if she's getting paid appearance fees for that or not. So she might have made a small amount of money. I don't think it would be a huge amount of money, but she might have made a little bit of money on this. At no time were there multiple cameras set up and left to record, just static cameras. Christy's making a really good point there. Even with our modern ghost hunting type shows, you will see that they will frequently leave cameras set up as they're going through rooms, but then they just leave them running as they get out of those rooms as well, to pick up whatever's going on, if those are, balls of energy or rods or whatever. And unfortunately for this investigation, I'm not seeing that same level of control, nowhere near it with these guys, which definitely dings it a bit for me as well. There are so many people in this bungalow at one time that the cameraman never has everyone all in one shot. Any one of them could be sneaking around and faking whatever phenomena they chose. It's a very, very good point. And in particular, with the Jeff and Barry video, it literally looks like they're planning some of the stuff. There's one clip in particular where they find scissors on a floor, and Jeff is standing in front of Barry showing him. Barry walks past, Jeff moves behind him, and as Barry is filming the scissors, all of a sudden you hear this clank and he turns around and, oh my God, there's another pair of scissors that have now appeared on the stove. It's so easy for Jeff to have been the one carrying the second pair of scissors in the back of his pants, taking them out and throwing them on the stove as Barry's back was turned. And once again, that raises the question for me about, could Jeff be fabricating all of the experiences he's having on his own and not telling the people around him? I think that's certainly possible. Blood plasma dripping from the walls is not common, but there are noted cases of blood actually pouring out of walls, and Christy has provided an example of that. I will have in the description box below so you can take a look at it. Oklahoma man's apartment wall turns red with blood of his dead neighbor. There is another potential explanation for the blood plasma, which is something called liquid creosote. As a child, when the chimney would heat up, liquid creosote would drip down through some of the cabinets in the kitchen and get on our dishes. It looked enough like the blood plasma found by Hernandez that I cried about it until it was explained to me by my parents. We'll also have this link in the description box below so you can look into that more. And then we've already talked about the water pouring from the light switch. She found a pretty funny video of Jason Sudekis talking about when his house flooded and showing footage of the same kind of thing happening to him. Now, before we move on to the theories that actually support the haunting, let's take a look at the biggest criticisms that I have about Jeff and the incident of him being hung in the attic. And to do that, let's go ahead and start back on the document and take a look at those pictures again. Now, the story as it's told by Gary is he turns around, he fires off one flash, he sees Jeff hanging. My intuition at that point is, wow, I got to get to that person and help him with whatever's going on. And I'm probably going to move towards him in a very straight line. What we don't have here is Gary seemingly do that. If we look at the second photo, it looks like he is probably, I would estimate, about 5 feet away from Jeff at this point, and he has not walked in a straight line. He's kind of swung out to the side to get this next photo. I'm not exactly sure why he would have taken that path if he really felt like this guy's life was in danger. The other thing to note here is what's going on with Jeff's body. You know, he's up against this rail. His leg is supporting him on this one. But if we look at this photo, his leg is now down. His hands have changed position pretty significantly. And what's the first thing that happens when someone chokes? It's an instant reaction that, quite honestly, I don't think we can control. The first thing we do is reach for our throat, especially if there's a ligature of some kind. You're going to try to separate that. Do we have that happening in this case? No. Now, the way he explains it, he's going through some type of supernatural thing here. He says that he blacked out. He doesn't even know how he wound up being hung by the rafter there. So if that is indeed true, it could be that his mind is not functioning in the way that a normal person's would be. So maybe he's not responding naturally to it. But if that's the case, it seems pretty interesting to me about how he's holding this rail right here. Outside of all that, let's take a look at the video of him coming back down.
Jeff, here you go. Here you go. Are you okay, buddy? Shit. Look at his neck. Jeff, what's behind your neck?
I don't know what's on my neck.
Look at his throat. Oh, shit. Gary, get down out of there, buddy. Can you find my glasses? Gary.
Did you guys hear that? I know it's hard because there's creepy music all over it. He's coming down. They're telling him get down from there. They're saying, Gary, get down. And then Jeff turns back up. Think about this. You've just been hung by some supernatural force. You don't know what's around your neck, but you think that it's probably a rope or a cord of some kind. This happened in this attic space, which you already think is haunted and dangerous. And you tell the other guy who saved you, basically, hey, can you find my glasses? Unbelievable. For me, that reaction is completely off. It's completely wrong, and I don't understand it. Then there is this other piece, which is much more critical in my mind.
And it was wrapped so tightly that I couldn't get him off of the nail. It was over a nail, and I finally had to actually bend the nail down straight to even get the rope off of it.
So here we have Gary talking about how he got Jeff off the nail. And he's saying he bent that nail down with his hand. You see him actually do it. Well, if Jeff was truly being hung by that nail, I'm pretty sure his body weight would be a greater force than Gary's one hand bending the nail down. So it appears to me that Jeff was likely not actually being hung from that rope, not being hung by that nail. This is probably the biggest criticism that I have about this whole story. That nail on its own probably wouldn't be enough to hold a person's weight anyway. So was this guy really being hung? Not really. He's definitely supporting his own weight in some way. And you have his friend come over and literally use one hand to bend that nail down and get the rope off of it. It's not very convincing to me. Now, even with that argument, I have some problems because if this attic is as dark as everyone is saying, and they're not taking light sources up there, how did Jeff know to hang himself on that nail? He would have had to have known that the nail was up there if he took the rope up on his own. I don't think that's necessarily what happened. Another possibility is that the rope was up there already and that Jeff bumped into it while he was exploring up there and decided to take advantage of that situation and put his neck through it and act like he was being hung. It's weird. I know it's a bit of a stretch. Even I'm not sure if that explanation is reasonable. But when I also consider what else they found in this attic, you're talking seashells, a horseshoe, that one box. Is it possible that this was a play area or maybe like a secret hiding area for some child in the past? You know, how do seashells get up there? I don't know. Is it possible that this could have been a Boy Scout? And Boy Scouts frequently will practice specialized knots on little pieces of rope. Could it be that this is a Boy Scouts practice rope that he had hung on that nail many, many years before that no one had found until Jeff bumped into it when he was up there and decided to make it look like he was being hung by this? I don't know. I really struggle even with that explanation. But if you look at the footage of Jeff talking about this, he also describes how the cord seemed to be wound and then like it was put up on the nail, which some people might look at that and say, look, he's actually explaining to you how he did it, guys. But even for that, he would have to know that the nail was there. And in the dark, to be able to find a nail like that, it's really tough. It's really tough. I don't know which way to go with that. All right, now let's talk about theories that support the haunting. First of all, Jackie probably didn't make any serious money from going through all this. I think she probably made a little bit in appearance fees, but you're talking about her moving 3 times within a matter of a couple years. I mean, that's expensive just in itself. The strain on her psyche, having to pull her kids around all the place. It doesn't seem to me like Jackie had enough to gain by faking all this, unless she just specifically liked the attention of all these people coming to her house. She did appear to have a relationship with Barry Conrad at some point. Maybe that would have been enough motivation. I don't know. Her story has never changed, and she remains adamant that it's all real. That is very true. As a matter of fact, we have a clip of her. Let's go ahead and bring you back to the video here and see what she says. This is from, I think, 2015.
Till this day, society thinks that my case was fabricated. I can assure you that nothing was made up.
I mean, put plainly, she's definitely sticking to her story. Even today, a lot of the evidence presented can't be debunked. That is certainly true, particularly for most of the stuff that Jackie's talking about. I mean, I told you about the problems I had with the photos of the light sources and things like that. But the other occurrences where she has neighbors that are talking about seeing things, that is pretty compelling to me. The personal experience that she was talking about, the stuff that happened in the house, I find all that extremely compelling. The stuff that happens to Jeff, for me, is extremely hard to buy. I almost get the feeling that they had a real situation going on here, and when they got to it and started investigating it, that they felt like it wasn't going to be enough to be the big thing that they hoped it was going to be. So someone decided, we have to make this bigger, we have to make things happen, and that set Jeff into motion. That's kind of how I feel personally. Of course, he's never going to admit to that. And it's really tough because even trying to debunk like the hanging theory, I run into problems with that too, even with my theories about how to debunk that. So it is very tough to debunk this stuff. Previous and later residents seem to report that they've experienced haunting activity at that location. You can find comments from people in the neighborhood that say that they've seen and experienced things there as well. So there's definitely a lot of people claiming that that area in general is haunted. This would be a perfect case of poltergeist activity. Such alleged poltergeist manifestations have been reported in many cultures and countries, including the United States, India, Japan, Brazil, Australia, and most European nations. If we're sticking with Jackie's story, I totally believe that this would be a perfect example of a poltergeist activity. Jeff's story and the stuff that happens at Barry's apartment moves this into completely different territory. Extremely hard to believe. Christy described it best when she said it looks like a couple guys playing around trying to make a YouTube video about their apartment being haunted. It is really hokey. And quite honestly, if you want to see it just for the entertainment factor, watch that documentary all the way through to the end, and you will see some things that I find extremely questionable. Dr. Taff gave serious thought as to whether or not Jackie was faking the haunting, but could not find any evidence of a hoax. And Dr. Taff has been quoted as saying, "There is no such thing as the paranormal. It's a misnomer." He claims it's all complex psychological phenomena known as RSPK, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or zero-point energy, where the mind physically manifests the perceived paranormal events. In other words, she was causing the activity. I think that theory is very, very interesting. We could probably do a whole separate brain scratch just looking into that theory more. From looking at this, I feel like the occurrences that I think have the most validity are centered around her specifically. The other stuff that's going on, I'm having big time trouble buying it, and I'm really trying to remain open-minded, but I don't find the information that Jeff gives particularly compelling. And then when you talk about the physics and the logic involved, it just doesn't seem to add up for me. I'm really, really struggling with all of that aspect of it. But we do have Dr. Taff also interviewed in 2015 speaking here, and maybe we can get a better sense. First of all, he's going to give us some insight into possibly how that theory could apply to the entity now affecting Barry's apartment. So let's take a look at that.
And then Jackie was visiting Barry Conrad's old apartment in Studio City. And then upon leaving there, phenomena broke out there. We thought, what in the world's going on? And what we learned is amazing. It's the story that myths and legends are made out of. Why the phenomena started occurring in Barry's apartment, Studio City. He got involved in a little romance, nothing wrong with that, they're both adults. But Barry was using her a little bit, and she got angry. And the phenomena broke out there, things flying around, windows exploding, Jeff being picked up, thrown on the wall, bullets appearing on the table, burners coming on their own, scissors coming through a pillow, almost cutting Barry's face off.
Now, I have to say, he's taking these stories to a ridiculous level. The scissors coming through the pillow thing, there's footage of it in the documentary. That is certainly not what happened. They came home from dinner. For some reason, someone decided to lift up the pillows on the bed. There's no reason or logic for why they would have done that, but they lift up the pillows and there are two scissors laying flat on the bed. Nothing about the scissors coming up through the pillows and trying to slice someone's face off. It's strange to watch a man try to be so professional and to let things like that slide, exploding glass and scissors coming through the bed. Not exactly what's going on there. Is there a better sense that we can get from this video about what these people are really interested in?
Psychokinetic manifestation of Jackie Hernandez's anger, or frustration, or anxiety. And this was all captured in a great script written by Eric Ramos. I mean, he adhered to the detail as much as he could. This story could have been easily a 6-hour miniseries because there's so much detail and depth.
Hold on a second. Did this just turn into a pitch session? I don't know. Maybe we should go back to Jackie herself and see what she says.
My story is true and there were multiple witnesses. I hope that one day a studio will take notice of the screenplay written by Eric Ramos. His mission was to tell my story in a truthful, honest way, and he did just that.
Okay. Now, let me just say that I think this YouTube account that posted this video might be Eric Ramos. I'm not sure. It's called eman323. And he might have gone to them in particular and asked them to speak about his screenplay in that way because he was going to try to sell it. So this isn't them just being interviewed off the cuff and everything turns to the mention of this screenplay. However, they are making themselves available. They are putting the information out there in that way specifically to try to get this screenplay developed and or made. So it raises some really big questions for me about what's motivating these people, which in one way kind of sucks, because I think this theory of recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis is something really interesting, maybe even potentially for a screenplay. But instead, we're hearing that the events are being amplified for dramatic effect, and you now have the supposed experts, making comments like that. So I really struggle with it. But this is where I turn it over to you, Brain Scratchers. What do you think about this case? Personally, I'm of the mind that I think some real things happened to Jackie. I think the team that was brought in didn't find what they were looking for and started fabricating some events. But I don't know if Dr. Taff or Barry Conrad were part of that. I don't know if they actually helped develop those events. All of the events center around Jeff. He's the one that had the cord tied around his neck, but needed the guy that saved him to go back and get his glasses. He's the one at the Ouija board meeting that gets thrown against the wall, which, let's be honest, how hard is it for you to fake being thrown from a table to a wall that's right behind you in a trailer? We're not talking about a huge room where he flew, 30 feet, kind of as they depict it in the documentary. We're talking about a much smaller space, more likely. He's the one that is around at Barry Conrad's house when the scissors are found under the bed and the glass is broken and found on the typewriter and the mayo jar is found upside down. There's a lot of ridiculous things, but Jeff seems to be a key piece of it. And sure, you might take the information that they got from talking to the spirits that this was the result of Jeff looking like the guy that killed this guy in 1930. Is it really all that reasonable? For me, I struggle. I struggle quite a bit. One more big thank you to Christy Strasinger for doing all this hard work on this episode, and for you guys for sticking it out with me here. I hope you have an excellent day, and if you're not busy this afternoon, remember, Johnny Vlogs Live. You can come be a part of it, or you can check it out on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I'll catch you right back here on the Lord and Arts channel.